Welcome back, miners. My name is Nathan Asbell, and I'm a therapist here at the Department Student of Wellbeing.
My name is Amber Johnston. I'm also a counselor at Student Wellbeing, and it's time for your morning cup of joe.
So today I want to do a podcast to discuss some of the work of Dr. William Glasser. He was a psychiatrist, and he developed and founded this technique of therapy we call reality therapy. We often use it in counseling here at the S&T because it can be more short-term. Whenever we discuss an intervention with a student or client, and we have these discussions about interventions that we're using, the interventions are almost always founded on a philosophical framework of some kind. So the one that Dr. William Glasser discusses is often involved in needs.
Mm-hmm.
So his philosophical framework is that each of us has 5 needs. Amber, do you remember what those 5 needs are?
Survival, power and achievement, freedom, fun and enjoyment, and belonging.
Yeah. As we discuss what these needs are, it's important to keep in mind that each of these needs will overlap one another from time to time.
Right. I like Glasser's framework better because unlike Maslow, who most people are more familiar with, it's not a hierarchy of needs. Like each one is independent of each other, whereas Maslow is more...
Right. Maslow's needs are, if you don't achieve this need, you can't fulfill these other needs.
Right.
Whereas the 5 needs, there's only one need that you really have to achieve first, and that's the first one we're going to talk about, which is survival. Because having fun in relationships really doesn't matter if you don't have air to breathe, or if you haven't had water in 3 days. So,
right.
But other than that, yeah, the other
I'm not
needs.
really worried about if I belong with my friends if there's a tiger chasing me.
Yeah, so survival, of course, trumps the other ones. And survival, obviously, is the biological need that we have. I mean, the other 4 are psychological in nature. The need to survive is fairly obvious. We need air, water, food, sleep, and other biological processes. And like you said, we have a need to feel safe. Like,
absolutely.
We don't want to be chased by a tiger or a bear or a spider monkey with nunchucks. We just don't want to get injured or killed. And when these things are not met, it becomes incredibly difficult to meet the psychological needs. So when a person is starving to death, literally engaging in our other needs that don't acquire food would be a waste of time and resources. There are several movies and media items which show, man versus nature. In fact, there's a television show called Man versus the Wild, and it stars Bear Grylls. I don't know if you've ever seen Bear Grylls, but he gets dropped off in these remote locations and has to survive for a certain number of days or make it to civilization. And he's a former British Special Forces guy, and he would be dropped off in these locations, and he would survive living off the land. And they seem to capture and captivate an audience. The show has gone on for several years. And it taps into those natural survival instincts, like, what would I do if I needed to drink water and I had nothing? And he talks to you about, some of the stuff he does is quite frankly disgusting. And I think I might rather die. But, I mean, obviously, there's other things that he does that are really quite clever.
Well, there's Survivor and that newer show that's been on, Naked and Afraid.
Yeah. So the survival idea is just all in of our media. Can you think of any other movie or show about survival and a good example?
Well, I like one of my favorite references for that is Nebula, who was Gamera's sister in the Avengers series. And what's interesting about Nebula is that she was, even though she was Gamora's sister, she was not the favorite. Gamora was very much the favorite.
Yeah, Thanos favored Gamora.
Yeah, and so Nebula was left a lot to fend for herself. And so she ended up going through a lot and taking a lot of steps to survive, to just survive. She had a lot of enhancements done to herself. She ended up making a lot of choices, and they were all based on just trying to live.
Right, because being part of her father's group, I mean, this is a man who would slaughter half the population of a planet without blinking an eye. with his ships and his armies.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, survival would have been her primary function in doing all these cybernetic enhancements and things that she was working on. More machine than person, it seemed like, towards the end. Yeah.
Well, she did a lot. She betrayed Gamora a lot. And a lot of that had to do with her desire to survive and live, because she was dependent upon Thanos to survive.
Yeah. And of course, in the end, they eventually become sisters.
Mm-hmm.
The next one I want to talk about is power and achievement. Now, this need sometimes gets misunderstood. When we think power, it's like, President of the United States. We think of, really powerful superheroes, Superman, Thor, Iron Man, all these great powers and equipment and stuff. But that's not necessarily mean power over others. It actually means a sense of feeling powerful within ourselves. People get this need met through a variety of activities. Power and achievement sometimes can be met by getting good grades. Acing a test makes me feel powerful. Getting straight A's makes me feel like I've achieved something. Getting on the dean's list achieves something. Graduating from S&T and going on and getting a master's degree, or going to work for a great company like, Raytheon or some of these other Rocketdyne or NASA. I mean, they mean a big deal. Schlumberger. Sometimes it can be met by playing a video game level that's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, when they play a video game level, or if they're playing online with their friends and their squad takes out another squad, it feels really good. It feels quite impressive. It could also mean scoring a goal in soccer. It could also mean getting the winning football touchdown catch in the end zone. Getting recognized as an expert in your field and getting an award could also make a person feel powerful, or that they've achieved something. Who do we know in media that would be an epitome or an embodiment of this particular need being met?
I think Will Smith's character in The Pursuit of Happiness would be a great example, because Will Smith's character, Jay, wasn't it? Was originally, he was selling these portable bone density scanners, and he wasn't making hardly any money. The scanners were expensive, it was newer technology, and nobody really wanted to buy them. And so he was carting them all over the place, and he wasn't making enough to even pay rent, and they were vastly failing. Then his wife ends up leaving him, they end up homeless, and now it's him and his small child, and he has the opportunity to join an internship on the stock market.
Yeah, with Dean Witter Reynolds, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's able to be picked up by a Mr. Twistle, and they share a cab, and this guy is able to help him. He solves a Rubik's Cube, and which this guy Twistle thought was like impossible, and impressed him, and so he got an interview at Dean Witter Reynolds. And he was able to eventually get the one position that was open that these 20 other interns were trying to get. So he got the paid position, and because of that, became quite wealthy in the end. And so that's, I think, is a great story. Here's a man that overcame all these odds and obstacles and became someone very successful, kind
Absolutely.
of at the top of his game. I think another important one is freedom. This is an interesting one because freedom means different things to different people. Freedom to choose, the power to think of what one wishes to think, to have power over one's own course of life and destiny, power over one's own body. Isn't this one of the reasons that we find being lied to as deeply offensive? I mean, honestly, if you think about it, if I'm lying to you, I'm stealing from you your freedom to think and make choices on correct information.
Mm-hmm.
It's a violation of our natural freedom and ability to choose. So being lied to is deeply offensive because it steals from us that sense of freedom and that sense of control. Here's where power and control can overlap, because if you lie to me, then I no longer have the freedom to act on truth and the power to do so. So it's one of those overlaps. Another great cultural piece for this would be Jean Valjean from Les Mis. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a long time since I've seen Les Mis, but he was in prison, and he got out, escaped.
Right.
No, he was paroled. but he violated his parole
Yes.
and was kind of protected. He stole silver from this religious fellow, and this religious fellow forgave him and said, "Hey, you forgot to take the candlesticks with you." As the police are there trying to arrest him, "Why'd you forget the candlesticks? Here you go." And he told Jean Valjean, "I bought you with these candlesticks. I bought your soul." And so Jean Valjean is able to then go and lead a new life. He became the mayor, owner of a factory, and what was the name of that cop that was chasing him? I'm trying to remember.
Javert.
Javert. And do you remember what happens with Javert?
Didn't he commit suicide?
And I think towards the end he does. He chases Jean Valjean all the way to Paris, where Jean Valjean has the daughter of a prostitute that used to work in his factory.
Yeah, Colette.
Colette, yes. And so he's got this little girl with him, and he raises her. And eventually Javert realizes that, you can't be the free man that you deserve to be as long as I'm alive, because I have to follow the law. So the only answer I could think of is if I end my life. And so after that, Jean Valjean, there's no one chasing him. And he's able to have that sense of freedom after that.
Well, and the whole thing is set on a background of the French Revolution.
Yes.
And so we have a lot of themes of freedom through that entire play.
Yes. I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. I forgot that it's behind the, and then the barricades and the big red flag waving. Yeah, I remember that now. Right, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, Colette's boyfriend was one of the leaders of the revolution.
And the boyfriend had this girl that was chasing after him too, and
yes,
that's the girl pretending he's beside me, down by the river singing. Yeah, okay, getting it now. Next we have belonging as a need. Dr. William Glasser discussed how most of our emotional and psychological problems, he believed, stem from this particular need not being fulfilled. Because, if you think about it, a lot of our depression, a lot of our frustration and anger comes from relationships, or lack of relationships, or relationships gone awry. Mm-hmm. So think about graduate students who suddenly have an issue with their advisor. Think about people breaking up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, divorce, people cheating on them, best friends no longer being friends anymore, roommates moving out and going to college, people who come here and feel alone and have no friends because maybe they're from Kentucky, New York, Connecticut, Alaska, Alabama, all these different places.
The whole movie Mean Girls is based on that idea of trying to fit in.
Oh, yeah. Mean Girls.
Katie comes from South Africa, and she's been homeschooled, and she comes in, and she goes into this school where you had these three girls they called the Plastics, and they were in this clique, and she was trying to be part of it, and in order to belong with her other social group who was being made fun of by the Plastics. So it's this whole dynamic of trying to fit into different social groups.
Yeah, Lindsay Lohan.
Yep.
Oh, poor girl. All right, so this is the one need that when it's not met, when we feel thwarted belongingness, can lead to major depression, anxiety. Sometimes the reason for a lack of belongingness or that sense of belonging can be from things like social anxiety, which we have a great therapist here by the name of Bethany who runs a social anxiety group. If you're interested, come on up and check it out. We'd love to help you with that. So one person in media that demonstrates the idea of belonging, who would you pick?
Spider-Man.
Okay, why Spider-Man? You've got me on this one. Why Spider-Man?
Well, because when you look at, especially in the new Spider-Man movies, because you look at him and he gets this incredible gift of powers, and he's kind of a nerdy, awkward kid. And so he's got his friend group that he's very close to, and he is picked up by Tony Stark, and so he wants to belong to the Avengers, but he also doesn't want to be alienated from his friends. And so for a long time in the first couple movies, he's living this double life where he's trying to belong and be part of the adventures and, hey, Mr. Stark, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, he's hiding this whole huge section of his life from his best friends.
Yeah, Ned finds out first, and I think MJ finds out or figures it out because MJ is really smart. Later on. But yeah, I can see that. That totally makes sense. Leading that double life, trying to belong to two different groups at once. I think it was there's a couple of famous therapists that have said, Carl Rogers being primary among them, that when someone has empathy for us, we belong, and we are invited back into the human race, that we become human again when we're with other people. And it's just that concept that we belong again when we are invited into groups and people can empathize with us, that helps us to feel human. It helps us to stay grounded. It helps us to have, joy and happiness in our life. And, belonging mixes a lot with freedom, and it mixes a lot with fun and enjoyment. Because, if you're miserable with someone, and you might belong, but is that belonging really what you want? So lots of times belonging comes with fun and freedom and these other aspects too.
Well, and we tend to, in general, push down our other needs in favor of belonging. Like, how often do people push down their morals or their values and things like that in order to fit in with a group, to belong?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Lastly, we have fun and enjoyment. So, yes, this is a psychological need. It's one of the reasons why I like this model, is because, yes, you need fun in your life. You need enjoyment. Mm-hmm. Now, what is fun to one may not be to another, obviously. Some people's idea of fun is to sit and read a book during the summer outside on the back porch in a rocking chair with a glass of country-tide lemonade. So, Amber just raised her hand. That's me. Other people, it's going to Disney World, riding roller coasters, playing sports. Other people, it's playing video games. Other people, it's just sitting there having a good conversation. Some people, it's going camping and hiking. Mm-hmm. So whatever that is for you, like for example, there's another word I like to use with this. It's contentment. Because, going camping and sitting under the stars doesn't typically get our adrenaline going, but it can cause us to contemplate how vast the universe is and imbue us with a quiet contentment, just enjoying the beauty of nature, hoping not to get eaten by bears. So, let's think about who or what might embody this particular need, fun and enjoyment. I know you talked about a trope, and it's a funny trope, and you said it, and I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, this is true. So go ahead, Amber, what's the trope?
There's a movie trope called the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. And what it is that in a lot of movies, especially romantic movies, or there is a girl that is introduced, and she embodies bringing fun to the bored and otherwise average male protagonist. And they don't give the girl a whole lot of depth. Like, her only value is to impart the need for fun on the male antagonist. And a really good examples of this would be like Elizabethtown, Along Came Polly, Enchanted.
Yeah, it's funny when you see it in reverse too, because I think we talked about this for a minute. Titanic was one of them, where Rose was this character that was miserable, living this life of propriety and being a young lady and having to eat and sit and act and behave in a way that was proper and dignified. And then there's Jack, who is a fairly shallow character, but teaches people how to spit, plays poker, acts the fool half the time, and he ends up turning her world upside down and filling that, dream pixie male boy toy kind of trope. I don't know, but it's kind of the opposite of the female pixie. I can't even say it. Good grief! Can you help me out?
Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Okay, and then lastly, fun and enjoyment. There's a classic movie called Dead Poets Society. Minors, if you haven't seen this movie, you should watch it. Great movie.
Carpe diem.
Carpe diem. Just know there are some thematic elements to it that might be triggering. One of them in the movie dies by suicide. But otherwise, it's a really great movie. It has a lot of great meaning to it. Robin Williams, classic, as he plays Mr. Keaton. And so we really highly recommend it. But in Dead Poets Society, these boys are at a preparatory school. And it's not a very fun place. It's an awful place. And they learn to suck the marrow out of life there and really enjoy themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they learn the first thing he has them do is stand on their desks or their chairs.
Stand on his desk and take a look at the world in a different place.
Yes.
And that's where the phrase carpe diem really came into play, seize the day. Now, it's important to see how each one of these needs impacts us. So people might say, dude, I'm an introvert and I don't need too many friends. I don't know about this belonging stuff. That's perfectly okay. Some people who are introverts have the inner circle of intimate friends that they spend time with. Others may need to be in a party and have a party life, and that's fine too. It is important for us to measure the intensity of each need versus the amount of fulfillment that we have with each need. If you notice a gap in your needs and in wanted intensity and how much they're getting fulfilled, well, then it's time to make some plans to get those fulfilled. Well, thanks again for listening, miners, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, and have a great day.
For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com.